And welcome to episode 90 of Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres. Happy New Year, everyone. Well, we're here, 2022. We've made it. We survived another year. Well, everybody who's watching is, anyway. Yeah, here we are, live on YouTube. If you're here, say hello, leave me a comment, and tell me what it's like in your part of the world. And yeah, so tonight, this afternoon. Well, it's tonight if you're in Asia, this afternoon if you're kind of Europe, this morning if you're over in the Americas. We're going to be looking at the best photos of 2021. Not my best photos, but the best photos of viewers of this podcast, you wonderful people who have submitted your images, either emailed them to me or put them in the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres Facebook group. Which if you haven't come across it already and you're on Facebook and you would like to join, go to, go to Facebook, type in Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres and you'll find it easily enough. So, people have been submitting their images, and this afternoon what we're going to be doing is looking through these images and hopefully become a little bit inspired. So what I'd also like you to kind of start having a little think about, maybe you can put some suggestions as we go through the next hour or so, or maybe I might even sort of put this in the group, but certainly there's a little challenge out, not a challenge, but suggestion out here. What are your goals, your photography goals for 2022? We've got a year ahead of us. Where do you want to take your photography? Is it a case of you want to start winning competitions? Is it a case of you want to get a better understanding of light? Is it just you want to have more smug points when you submit images to the challenges here on this podcast? Have a think about it. Let me know. I might actually conduct some kind of poll over the next week or two and just try and get a sense of where do you want to go with your photography and how can I help? How can this podcast help? How can the other members or viewers of this podcast help? We're all here because we have a passionate love for photography, an obsession with photography, really. We're all trying to master it and improve and move on from where we are. How can we help? How can we help each other? So have a think about that and let me know. I can see we've got a few comments in already. So let's take a little look. Pat says, I'm here for a quite mild Somerset. Greetings all. Yeah, it has been quite mild in the UK, certainly here in this corner of Scotland as well. For the beginning of January, it's not been as cold as you normally get. Roy says, greetings all from a wet West Yorkshire. Meg from downstairs says, good afternoon everyone. Cliffy says, Happy New Year all from a pleasantly mild Norfolk. Rosemary says, good morning from under a blanket of Christmas snow. Obviously not in the UK then. It's rare for us to have it so early and hold on to it for so long. Rosemary's over in the Pacific Northwest USA, I think. Excuse me. Maggie, my wife, says, wishing everyone a Happy New Year from Castle Douglas. Robert says, howdy all from Texas and a Happy New Year. April says, Happy New Year, everyone. Stacy says, good morning, rainy, a little warmer in this area today. That's in Pennsylvania, I think. Inga says, Happy New Year from Norway. Jacqui says, hello there from South Africa. And Stacy is also saying, Happy and healthy New Year to all. Excellent. Oh, this is great. So, like I say, what we're going to be talking about today then, or what I'm going to do is show you the images that people have been sending in. If you happen to be interested in my photos, my sort of pick of what I feel are my favourite photos, then actually I now have a blog post up online. At the beginning of January each year, I tend to put up my own kind of favourites of the previous 12 months. And if you go to kimayres.blogspot.com, obviously not right now, wait until the end, unless you want to watch this on the rerun, but go to kimayres.blogspot.com, you can find my latest blog post, which is full of my own favourite images that I've done across the last 12 months. Oh, Jan's arrived as well and says, Happy New Year, everyone. Happy New Year to you too, Jan. Excuse me, slightly dry cough. It's been one cold after another. Fortunately, we've not had COVID in the house, but we have had one cough and cold after another over the last several months. Feels like forever. I passed the worst of it, but still lingering slightly. So, okay, well, let's make a start then. Let's have a little think about this. What images do we start with? So, what we're going to do is I'm going to go through the photos people have sent in and the comments that they've put with them, and hopefully by the end of this we'll all feel a bit more inspired for what we're going to go out and do with our photography this year. So the remit was excuse me, your best photo of 2021. Now I've kind of left it wide open as to how you interpret best. So we've got quite a range of things, quite a few flowers I seem to think as well. But we've got about 16 different viewers send in stuff. And what I think we're going to do is we're going to start with Rosemary. So if I flip over here, you can see this incredible photo of, well, let me read what Rosemary says. She says, I picked this photo of a long-tailed weasel. Not that we can see the long tail at this angle. Because it combines the moment, acceptable technical success in the face of photographic challenges, and a simple story of the subject better than the others. So she goes on to say that her husband was outdoors doing some maintenance to his tractor when this little fellow peered over the edge of the motor housing. He texted me to come fast and bring cameras, and we both really enjoy observing and photographing wildlife together. Weasels are an animal we've never seen before on our property, so this was a fun first to share. Together we followed the speedy little fellow as he darted between the tractor and a woodpile and then the car parked nearby. The composition was possible only because I shot many pictures. Hooray for digital! And this is so true. I mean, and it is a great thing about digital photography is we can go click, 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 click until we try and get the photo that we want. Many were blurry and contained distracting elements, but this shot from a short series came out where he was peeking out from under the car came out fairly sharp, with his head and body framed against solid shadow. I was able to crop out unnecessary bits that distracted from the story, and I'm really happy with the curve of the shadow leads to the subject. My goal for 2021 was to move from taking pictures that only I would see to sharing them publicly. It took me 5 years to rally the courage to share a photo on Photograph after signing up, and this year I did it. I've also greatly appreciated interacting with other photographers through the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres podcast, which also represents a step up in courage. Brilliant, Rosemary, and it's really good that I think it's a strong thing. You know, we can start off, we can take photos, and we take photos for ourselves, and we're terrified of sharing them because, well, for any number of reasons, but primarily we just worry about how other people are going to react and roll their eyes and make us feel like we're just not good enough. It does take courage to stick our photos out there and get some kind of response, and to be able to put up with a response that isn't always necessarily, hey, isn't that a great photo? But then that's how we learn as well. But it's always good to have a strong and supportive environment, and I'm delighted that you feel that, you know, you get that with the podcast and the people who frequent the podcast, because this is it. The podcasts aren't just me turning around and talking to the camera for an hour every week. Podcasts are also every one of you who join in the chat, who submit images and give supportive comments. As I go through these photos, between each photo I will flip back to the comments, see if there's any comments. So if anybody wants to make any wee comments or whatever about the photos as we're going, please feel free to do so. Rosemary goes on to say, for 2022, I would like to print some of my images, either in photo books or as canvases to hang in our home. I think seeing the images on display would be both affirming and an inspiration to grow in my photography skills. And I think that's a really good idea. Every now and again, it's really nice to take one of your pictures and print it up. We get so used to seeing them on the screen, we forget just how odd it is almost, but how wonderful it is to actually see our pictures printed up. I mean, I've been doing professional photography now for over a dozen years, but nearly all the photos I do are presented in digital format. Every now and again, though, I will print one up for whatever reason, and it always surprises me. It always looks, oh wow, it's like you look at the photo in a different way when it's printed, and certainly if you print it and stick it in a frame on the wall, it's very different. Similarly to when my pictures appear in magazines, I always look at them in a very different way. There is something about printed material where you do look at the photo in a different, and I think it's worth doing that every now and again. If you have a photo that you're particularly pleased with, why not print it up? Excuse me. So this photo then, Rosemary, weasel on a tyre in the wheel arch, I think is brilliant. I mean, it really is. It's so much fun, and I think it is a really good crop. You sent me the original unedited version, and I think this is a good crop. You've taken out, as you say, the distracting elements. There's just enough left in there. That lovely curve, but also the fact that the head and the body are against the shadow of the wheel arch, so that the weasel really stands out. So, with this curve pulls our eye up. It kind of frames it rather nicely. Even the kind of the V of the alloy wheels there kind of comes in and sort of cups the shape of it. So yeah, I think smug points. Tonight or this afternoon rather has to be a day of smug points. I think for anybody who's been brave enough to put their photos in. But you're all putting your best photos in, so I think enjoy your smug points. So thank you so much for sending that one in, Rosemary. Okay, let's see if we've got any more comments. Oh, there's a Sandy Gay says Happy New Year from Kakubri near Castle Douglas. Happy New Year to you, Sandy. So glad you could make it along. Alex says Happy New Year, Kim. Hi, Alex. Glad you could make it too. Pat says Charming Rosemary. I must have missed this one. No, you didn't, Pat, because Rosemary is not on Facebook, so she doesn't submit them to Facebook. All the images I get from Rosemary, she emails to me directly. And that's true for anybody else who's not on Facebook, but would still like to take part, either in the challenges or the critique. Then kimayres.co.uk is my website. My email address, kim@kimayres.co.uk. Just make sure you spell Kim with a K-I-M and not a K-Y-M, as occasionally some people seem to enjoy doing. But send me your images and then I can include them in the podcast. What else have we got here? Inga says, great capture. Rosemary says also that she hasn't shared this one before. April says that little fellow's so cute. Sandy says, great picture, looking sharp. Stacy says, cute little animal. Rosemary says, I find it so inspiring to see your photos in the magazines. Kim, congratulations. Well, thank you, Rosemary. Very, very much appreciated. Viji's here, says, good evening, everyone. A very happy new year to everyone. Had guests at home. Sorry for joining late. We'll watch the missed part after this. I'm really glad you can make it, Viji. I'm hoping that this means you have power back. The other day, massive floods going on around where Viji lives in Chennai in southern India, and power was out for a little while. So we're kind of hoping that that was all sorted out. So looks like it is good. Cliffy says, great capture. I can't help humanising the weasel. It looks like he or she's smiling. Pat says, also if a photo is printed, you can kiss it. Thanks, Kim. I guess it depends what is a photo of, Pat. Sandy says, it needs to be quite sharp for enlarging for print. This is very true, Sandy. It is a good point that if you are going to print up your photos, you need to have as high a resolution as you can. There's a lot of photos we take, and if we're taking them with phones or we're taking them on kind of bit point and shoot, they might look fine at web level, but if you're going to print them up, they need to be of a higher resolution and sharper. Printing them will kind of show up the flaws a lot more. So, but if your picture is high resolution enough and it's sharp enough, I certainly think it's worth doing for the fun of it. Right, okay, let's take a look at the next photo then. So next up we have Cliffy. Sent us this wonderful photo. Says, I'm not sure if it's my best photo of 2021 as per the brief, but it's certainly one of my favourites. I don't get many opportunities to see waterfalls as I live in Norfolk, which is probably the flattest county in the UK. And for those of you who don't live in the British Isles, Norfolk, if you're looking at the picture, is sort of on the right-hand, lower-ish right-hand side, a bit up and to the right of London. But yes, it's known as the Flatlands. I mean, it really is kind of more like Holland as such. Very flat, not a lot in the way of hills, and as such, not a lot in the way of waterfalls. So Cliffy goes on to say, enjoying some time in North Yorkshire in September, I made a beeline to go and visit the Falling Foss waterfall and get a long exposure image. Camera settings for anyone who was interested were f/18, 50 seconds, ISO 64. Wow, 50 seconds. Now, even at 50 seconds, I mean, that feels like a long time, even at f/18. Was it really dark, or did you use a filter on that one, Cliffy? To do a daylight shot with a 50-second exposure, generally speaking, would blow it out. But then again, it does look like it was quite a dull day, and if there's a lot of trees about and what have you, perhaps. But the long exposure is great, because as well as allowing for this sort of creamy, milky nature of the water that comes down here, what's also really lovely, I love the way the pool, you've got these little swirls where you get these eddies and currents that kind of go around. It might be leaves floating on it, or things like that, and they just kind of start moving in a circle and create these. So you can have a lot of fun with long exposure if you can make, and certainly generally speaking we use long exposure for lower light systems, but if you can go out there and get in amongst moving water, you can have a lot of fun with long exposure photography. So great one that, Cliffy. Really enjoyed looking at that, so thanks for sending that one in. What else have we got? Oh yeah, okay, so Cliffy says he had a 5-stop filter on. Okay, so for those who aren't too sure what that's about, is basically you can get filters for your cameras. They're almost, it's like a little piece of glass which screws onto the end of the lens, and it's kind of a bit like putting sunglasses on the front of your camera. So essentially what you're doing is you're letting less light in. Now, generally speaking, when we're doing photography, you're looking to get the maximum amount of light in. So that you're not having to worry about high ISO and noisy pictures and to get the best kind of quality. But when you're trying to do this long exposure during the daytime, the problem is just too much light getting in. And at that point, being able to put some kind of filter on the front, in this case, Cliffy had a 5-stop filter on, which is the equivalent to sort of making 5 level of extra adjustments on your aperture or your shutter speed. So it gives you that extra ability to be able to prevent it from overexposure. So Rosemary says that's such a serene image, Cliffy, very relaxing and lovely. Meg says waterfalls are fantastic. I really love the sound of water. April says it's really pretty. I would love to see it cropped. And Inga says really like the milky water. Excellent. Okay, let's move on. So the next up we have Conny. And Conny says, my first post here and my favourite picture of this odd life-changing year. Not at all unnerving, eek. The lady on the beach just brought me peace as seeing her. Just brought me peace seeing her. Looking at this picture, I can still feel the breeze, the sand on my feet, and feel the off and on again sunshine. Brings a smile to my face all over again. So obviously it must have been in the off the sunshine bit, but it's a fairly, this one was posted into Facebook, quite small layer, but actually if we zoom in a bit you can see the woman sitting on the beach here. So I'm assuming then that, you know, well, the fact she's sitting there, kind of, that it was sunny in between. But yeah, it's quite interesting, this one, next to the lighthouse, rather open expanse of beach in front of her. Excuse me. And yeah, and I think that's one of the things about photography is photography can act in a couple of different ways. One is, like the long exposure picture by Cliffy, is photography allows you to see things in a way that you don't normally see them. We can't see long exposure because our eyes aren't operating that way. The other thing is where photography acts as a trigger to the memories. And in this case then, it's that for Conny, the idea of sort of looking at this picture is it immediately takes her back to, it's not just the visual, it's all the other senses that were going on at the same time. The smells, the sounds, particularly the feel, like the sand between the toes or the wind, the breeze on the cheek. And so when she looks at this, she kind of gets a much bigger sense of that going on. Now, the question is, generally speaking for photography, when we're taking photos for other people to look at, does that translate to other people? And I think certainly for the rest of us to get a better sense of a summer's day, a streak of sunshine would have maybe done a little bit more. But at this moment, we're not going really too much into critique. This is Connie's favourite photo of the year. And I think, yeah, if when we've got these photos that just take us back to a particular time and place, that's always fun. So thanks for sending that one in, Conny. Excuse me. Pat says, in reply to Meg, yes, wouldn't it be great to have some sound effects? I think with reference to Cliffy's waterfall there. April says she really likes the lighthouse. Okay, next up then, we're going to look at Debbie's picture. And where are we? And Debbie sent in this one. Debbie says, my best pick. I've been playing around with water light and this was a hard project. Patience is the key. I challenged myself to create pictures like this, but with a basic setup. This was taken with no fancy gear, bag with a hole, plastic milk bottle, and blue tack. It's the mixture you have to get right, and the timing, coloured torch with built-in strobe, homemade background, editing the white balance and saturation. So essentially, Debbie here was playing around with water drop photography. And although I haven't had a go at doing that myself, I kind of know the principles. And there's quite a few YouTube videos out there. And maybe this year, maybe it's one of those things I should have a go at doing in 2022 is actually have a go at water drop photography. It's one of those things I kind of want to try out. It can get a little bit messy, but it's, again, talking about that notion of one of the great things about photography is it allows you to see things that you can't with the normal human eye. This notion of that frozen moment when the water drop comes down, splashes, a little tiny sphere of water just appears and is captured. It does take a lot of patience. It can also create quite a bit of mess, so do make sure you've got plenty of towels or absorbent bits and pieces around as well when you're doing the photography. But it is one of those things that you can do at home. And in this case, you've got a tray of water. You've got like a little bag, plastic bag suspended with a little hole in it where the water's coming down and dripping. And then what you're doing is you're firing a light and maybe an off-camera flash or something like that, and going click, and hopefully trying to get everything timed up so you can just capture that moment. It's a lot of work and does require patience and repetition, but I think when it works, I think it's one of those really rewarding things. Everybody I know who's ever had a go at this just kind of gets all funny and gooey about the whole process, because it's one of those things where you just go, oh wow, look at that, I managed to do that. So, yeah, I think it's one of those things certainly worth having a go at if you haven't tried it already. So, yeah, thanks for that one, Conny. Sorry, not Conny, Debbie. Right, Inga was saying it was a very nice atmosphere at the beach. April, referring to the water drop shot, I think, says this is a very creative shot. And Rosemary says, congratulations on trying and succeeding at a new genre. Love the symmetry of the water and the drop. And Inga says they worked out very well. Very impressive. Excellent. Right, okay, next on then, we will move on to Inga. And now, so Inga says, I tried to place flowers in a vase and put plastic wrap in the water to support the stems. The bubbles and the layers from the plastic were amazing. An initiated kind of photo shoot where I played with the flowers and the plastic wrap. And I think that's brilliant. That's where you're sort of just starting to get creative. You try something, or maybe you've got a little bit of plastic wrap, got some water, and suddenly you're thinking, oh, there's something really interesting here. I like this. So you start developing it and moving it and trying out all sorts of different options to see what's going to work. And that notion of the plastic, the water, the flowers, also all happening through the glass vase as well. It's all creating these amazing textures and reflections. So yeah, it's kind of really, you can kind of lose yourself in a picture like this somewhat. Inga says, I found it really difficult to get the right focus and depth with my Fujifilm camera. So actually I'm more satisfied with one of the iPhone captures like this one. I'm quite happy with the textures, the colours, the depth and the details in the photo. And I think there's kind of a good point here, which is sometimes, to be honest, the sophistication of mobile phones these days. If your mobile phone certainly is less than 2 years old, and some of the ones that are certainly less than a year old, the quality of them is absolutely outstanding, is really quite amazing. The other thing is that they're not just taking photos as such with light going through the lens. They have an awful lot of built-in algorithms, gubbins, software and what have you to enhance your photo. What it does mean is that when you take your photo, there's all sorts of things that go on where it's automatically adjusting the shadows, automatically adjusting the highlights, working out which bit it needs to sharpen. There's a lot of kind of AI really going on in the photo. So it does mean that very quickly you can end up, your basic photo, quick snapshot, is often a lot better on your phone than on your DSLR. Your more expensive camera might not be able to, as a quick snapshot, seem to get as good a photo. However, where it becomes really noticeable is the problem with essentially the phone which has all the auto settings is when it does the auto settings in a way you didn't want to. You can't override it in the same kind of way. Whereas if you've got a sort of a bit more sophisticated camera, you can go to places, that's where you can go to places where the iPhone can't. The other problem is very often the photos that you're taking with your phone are fine at web level. And that's really what they're designed for. They're designed for you taking the image and then sharing it straight onto social media, Facebook, Instagram, what have you, where it doesn't really need to be able to work blown up. But if we're talking about the idea that Rosemary was mentioning earlier of actually printing up some of your photos, then to print them up, you really got to have the quality. And when I look at a photo like this, fun though it is, you don't have to move in much before you realise that the quality wouldn't work as a blown up picture. Now, it might be partly because this is reduced for Facebook. I don't know what the original one was like. But there's elements to this where even beyond, if I look in here, even I think it's not just the case of the fact that this has been reduced to sort of fit on Facebook. I think that actually there's aspects to this which means I don't think this would work if it was printing up. Now, if you're not intending to print it up, that doesn't matter. Great photo. It's just, while we're kind of on the subject as such, I think it's worth remembering that the phone will very often get you into places where your more sophisticated camera won't at a basic level. I mean, we had a couple of months ago, we had a little bonfire out in the back garden when my stepson came down to visit us. Really lovely. And quick photos, my stepdaughter's phone took much better photos. It was able to sort of adjust for the firelight and everything else as well than my DSLR. But again, it's that thing of if we were trying to do a proper setup because we were trying to create, then ultimately I'd be able to override settings and setups and what have you in a way that the iPhone can't. So the iPhone is and similar are great for being able to get the snapshots, also great for being able to get those kind of quick images. The problem is if you want to go beyond the iPhone, if you want to change the settings, or very often if you want to get to that point where you can print up. So worth keeping that in mind. But for all that, this, though, Inga, fun photo, and I love the fact that you've sort of been getting in there and exploring and experimenting with texture and line and colour. Really, I like the colour palette on this as well. So, thank you for that one. Right, where are we? Right, okay, Jacqui says, very creative. April says, I'm impressed, very artistic. Stacy, beautiful textures. Inga says, shot in RAW on the iPhone at about 25 megabytes. Okay, so you're able to kind of get a much bigger shot then with that. That's cool. Okay, actually I have printed it out, not too big, but it worked out pretty well. Okay, well then that's great then, Inga. It may well be then that just the quality of it, when it was reduced to Facebook to send through, didn't really show it off at its best. And of course that's always a problem when we're doing this on social media. Right. Okay, and Rosemary says, such a clever idea, Inga. Would love to see more water added so the water line is removed. It's a just different kind of photo, really. It's one of those artistic decisions. Do you want to have the water line in or not? If you don't have the line there, then you're maybe less aware of actually what the setup is. You can do it both ways, but I think it's one of those things where it becomes a kind of an artistic aesthetic call, if you like. Okay. Next up then, let's go to Jacqui. So I remember seeing this one once before. I think, Jacqui, did you submit this one, or was it just on PhotoCrowd I saw it? I can't remember. Jacqui says, happy holidays, everyone, and season's greetings. This is one of my favourite images of 2021. I like the flowers and photographing glass, so imagined the two together could make an awesome combination. Also wish to thank him for all the trouble he has gone in order to bring his talent and live podcast into our homes during the past 2 years, as well as all the work involved therewith. Thank you. I always appreciate that. So yeah, an amazing photo here from Jacqui, where these stoppers in the bottles have basically become like lens balls, which if anybody used a lens ball, or if anybody remembers where we've talked about lens balls before, tend to also flip and invert the image. Then very creatively, by creating two flowers next to each other, using the lens balls, we're getting reflections within reflections, lines going on, happening within the bottles as well. It's very symmetrical. And you've got, I like the way the lines of the stalks come up and also sort of just, so we've got this sort of bridge line, this curve going through. So these lines from the stalks are bringing us our eye straight up to where the reflections are in the, are they stoppers, or is it just little lens balls on top of the bottles? Anyway, whatever they are, works particularly well, Jacqui. Creative, again, I can imagine quite a bit of patience with this, of sort of sitting there trying to get your depth of focus right, trying to make sure you're focused in just the right place so that everything comes out where you're wanting. Nice and colourful. So thanks for sending that one in, Jacqui. What have we got here? Stacy says, love this shot. Inga says, so cool with these reflections and lines. April, so creative, love it. Rosemary says, this is so beautiful on so many levels, Jacqui. Major smug points. Oh, that's sorry, I've been missing out the smug points again. Yeah, so smug points to everybody so far. The concept, the colours, the symmetry, the focus, gorgeous. Jacqui says they are in fact small lens balls. Small lens balls. Sandy says me too. Excellent. Right, okay, let's move on. So John next. John also with the flowers says, what does John say? John says, from an outing earlier this year at a local park. They're called the Park of Roses. I get a good rose at a Park of Roses. I bet it smelt wonderful as well. I used a black backdrop on this one, taken in the late afternoon. I thought it turned out well. Okay, yeah, so that's one of those interesting things for those of you who are into doing flower photography, is sometimes you have a problem where what you're wanting to do is isolate a particular flower from the background. The background itself might be too busy or might not actually have the kind of back that you would like. And sometimes then being able to have a backdrop that you can just sort of essentially hold behind it is not a bad thing. Looking slightly at the way there's folds and stuff in here, I wonder, is this one of those kind of pop-out things? You can have these, you can get these wonderful, I've talked before about like little reflectors you can get, which are, one sec, I have one just here, if I think about it. Show you this, if this is going to work, where this particular reflector is white on one side, gold on the other, but at the same time you can unzip it and then have black on one side or silver on the other. And what you can do, and it just sort of pops out, and you can sort of place it behind the subject and create whatever kind of background you want. And they fold up relatively small if you can ever figure out how to do it. So something that's actually only this big pops out to be, 3 or 4 times the size of it, and these fit into a little bag. So they're always quite handy if you want to bounce a bit of light coming back onto a subject, or if you just want to drop it behind the subject. They're relatively cheap. Just go onto your favourite site, photographic site or whatever, and say, type in 5-in-1 reflector. You'll generally find, and probably less than about £20 to £25, so about $35, whatever your local currency is, 30 odd euros, and a really good thing to have in your toolkit as a photographer. So yeah, being able to block off the background if you want to be able to do that. The only problem I would say with this, John, is the fact that you do have then the black texture in the background, which I feel is kind of detracting slightly from the rose. If you want to have a neutral background so all the attention goes on the rose, then you don't really want to have the texture. So either you kind of need to have the thing further away so that it's not appearing in the depth of field, have a shallower depth of field, a wider aperture on your camera so that only the rose is going to be in focus, or maybe in Photoshop smooth out the background a little bit. Those are possibilities. But other than that, bright, colourful, grabs the attention. It screams rose at us, which is exactly what you want when you're photographing a rose. So thanks for sending that one in, John. All right, okay, Sandy has said, like the shot, is referring back to Jacqui, it says, what are lens balls? Okay, a lens ball is basically a little round glass ball. And you can get them at different sizes. You can get them from that big, you can get them to this big. But if you've got a round sphere, and it's made of glass, essentially it acts kind of like a lens. And so what you can do is, if you, say, place it on a rock, you can focus your camera on the ball. The background will be out of focus, except for in the ball. In the ball itself, it will appear, the background will appear really sharp, but it will also be inverted. I think probably the quickest, I don't have any immediate shots that I can go and grab you without kind of taking us off too much of a tangent, but if you just Google lens ball images, go to Google Images and Google lens ball, you will very, very quickly see what they are. Viji from India has used these in a few shots that we've explored in earlier podcasts. I dare say they will crop up again. But yeah, you'll quickly find out what they are and how you can use them. So worth doing that. April says, I can smell this rose, pretty. Pat says, guaranteed to melt the heart. Right, okay, so next on then, we're going to move to Megan and Megan's brother Caleb. So here we go. Megan says, this is my brother Caleb. I took a series of black and white photos of him one day, and they are my favourite photo session I've done all year. He is one of the sweetest, most compassionate people I know, and this photo shows that most of all. And yeah, what a great photo. This, you know, there is, you can see the warmth in Caleb's eyes there, and, you know, clearly he loves being photographed by his sister. He's relaxed with you. And comfortable with you, and that makes a huge amount of difference. So when you're photographing people, if you're photographing people, most people are uncomfortable in front of the camera unless you take a lot of time to find ways to try and relax them. So portrait photography is not the easiest kind of photography you can do, because most of the time you're dealing with people who are uncomfortable in front of you, which doesn't lend to the best kind of photos. I was just trying to think, the lighting setup you've got here, the general all-round light, and actually if we look at the reflections in his eyes, we can see that there's two catch lights. There's one on the left, one on the right, same on this eye here, which makes me feel that what you've got is you've got two light sources. Now, whether one's a window and one's a softbox, or you're using two softbox, I don't actually know, but you're using two light sources, and what that does is it gives an all-round general kind of light. So it shows him up well enough. I think, Megan, what would be fun here would be if you took this photo and turned one of the lights off. Clearly, Caleb is comfortable with you taking his photo, so I would say start experimenting, start playing with shadows a bit more. It's great to be able to light people up, but I think when you're getting into portraiture, there's an awful lot of fun to be had with shadows. Light him just from one side. Start from a kind of 45 degrees, just from sort of one side. Then slowly move the camera around. Try 90 degrees on the side. Maybe try 90 degrees and then a reflector. So you're not getting the full light, but a partial light bouncing back on the other side. And I think if you can actually sit down and play with light in portraiture, you'll get a much more, once the shadows will add in more emotional depth and a sort of sense of three-dimensionality that you don't tend to get when you're using an all-round. This is kind of more classic butterfly lighting, which is where you have a big light source on one side and a big light source on the other, so you're creating this big wall of light. And it's a flattering light, because what happens is there's so much light, wrinkles, lines tend to sort of disappear, the shadow, because there's nowhere for the shadows to hide. But I think it gets really interesting when you allow the shadows to come out in full. So something to try for 2022, Megan, I think, is to play with shadows. And if you've got your brother here is happy to sit for you, then you have the perfect model, because he will be patient and enjoy doing it with you. So lovely photo of your brother. Thanks so much for sending that in. But start playing with single lights, start playing with shadows and see where you get. So thanks for sending that one in, Megan. Right, okay. April says, "Oh, he looks like a sweetheart." Pat says his face lights up the neutral background. Inga says, "Seems like a good relationship between the photographer and the model." Rosemary says, "Megan, this is a photo you'll always treasure. There's clearly something special about portraits, and this one certainly is that." And Rosemary says, "Wish my kids would cooperate like your brother." It's true. Anybody who's ever tried photographing people knows how difficult it is to find somebody who's happy to sit and model for you. I'm fortunate in the fact that my daughter Meg will very often she will model for me if I ask, and tends to also give me the sweetest of smiles. But it's rare to find somebody who's not a paid model who to actually relax in front of you. So capitalize on that, Megan. Make the most of it. Right, okay, so here we are, halfway through the podcast, or the photos that we're doing. Seem to be going on a little bit longer than I intended to, might speed up a little bit. However, smug points, yeah, all round for everybody who's been submitting something. And just to be reminded, if you would like to support these podcasts in any way, if you find them entertaining, useful, interesting, educational, then buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the places you can do it. Okay, we'll now return to the photos, and do stick around to the end because I'll tell you what I'm up to next week. Another little thought here, just a quick reminder, and maybe try and remember this at the end as well, which is to think about your kind of 2022 photographic goals, what they are, and how I might be able to, me and the other members of the Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres podcast and group, Facebook group and what have you, how we might be able to help you advance. What is it you would really want to know? How, when we get to best photos of 2022 in 12 months time, hopefully I'll be doing a similar kind of podcast. Where do you want to be able to take your photos to next? What kind of things do you want to be able to learn? Let us know. Okay, let's move on then. So next up we have Morven. Hold on one sec, where are we? Yeah, there we go. And so Morven says, "This is probably my most accomplished pic this year, straight out of the camera, taken a month or so on the hills above Carsfairn and Moneyhive." So that's kind of into the Galloway Hills in this kind of corner of Scotland. Says, "Came across this ramshackle building, which apparently used to be a village hall. I like the composition and the light. It might be in Scotland or a Scandinavian country or Canada, but here it is, just up the road from me." And yeah, that's kind of a fun, it's got that sort of sense of it's corrugated iron or corrugated zinc or corrugated something. And, it's kind of old building. And it looks much like a barn. And you're right, it could be something that sort of sat there either up in Scandinavia or even North America. And yet, yeah, it's not usually what you tend to find in the Galloway Hills in Scotland. The idea that it was a village hall, I think, is particularly interesting as well. It's a kind of it's got that quick build look to it, rather than it's not like a brick building, which you would normally associate with a village hall. So yeah, a really interesting find that. So yeah, not surprised you had a bit of fun with that, Morven. So thanks for sending that one in. Well spotted. Smug points, yes. Right, okay, next up we have Nurije. And Nurije's also gone for flowers, not looking to stick a black backdrop behind it this time though, because what we have with Nurije is a water lily. Obviously much harder to stick a backdrop behind if it's going to be underwater. Nurije says, "Chose the water lily as it's one of my favourites for the 2021 for two reasons. I love flowers and I love the raindrops all over it. Although I'm not a big fan of the rain." And yeah, no, you're right. I mean, there is something there. Very often you will find, if you're on these kind of online photo crowd, Guru Shots, Viewbug, these online competitions, and there's pictures of flowers. The ones where there's water droplets on the petals nearly always do better than the ones that don't. There's something that sort of adds texture. We know that those petals will be smooth and silky, but those little raindrops create all these little extra layers of texture and light bouncing off it. So yeah, getting in with the rain on the flowers is quite a good way of sort of enhancing your flower photos. But of course, it's very difficult to get the rain on the flowers without actually experiencing the rain. It's not actually impossible. There are people I know. I mean, in fact, I've got a funny feeling I did this once, where you get a water spray, you know, like one of these, just which you might have in the garden for watering your plants or whatever. You can go out on a sunny day and just cover your flowers with water. And in fact, actually, you can have a bit of fun on a sunny day then, because you can also get something, if you can sort of get interesting backlight, and you get a bit of spray, and you get the way the light then hits the water on the petals, then you can get some really interesting, beautiful light effects with that as well. Certainly something to sort of have a think about. But yeah, really bright, really colourful. The pink of the flowers contrasting nicely against the dark green of the background leaves. And we can just about make out the water down here as well, just behind it for this beautiful water lily. So, lovely photo there, Nurije. Thanks for sending that one in. Oh, Inga says with regard to the abandoned, the old village hall, very nice composition and the intriguing feeling of the abandoned. Yes, there is a whole subgenre of photography, essentially a photography of abandoned houses and buildings and a sense of decay, which fascinates an awful lot of people. There's some people I know who specialise particularly in that kind of abandoned building photography. Okay, on to Nurije's photo. April says, I love the raindrops as well. They say to put glycerin in it, I read in a photography magazine. Well, that's another possibility as well. Yeah, if you're using glycerin, the idea with that is it tends to allow for larger droplets. It's all to do with water tension. The tension in the natural tension in the water means that a droplet can only get to so big before it loses its shape and then sort of essentially bursts and runs out. If you put glycerin into it, it creates a slightly thicker level of water tension. So generally speaking, you can get slightly bigger water droplets. So yeah, good little tip on that. For something like this, I don't know how necessary that is just for a straightforward flower, but if you're doing one of these shots whereby you have like water droplets hanging off a leaf or a petal or even a twig, and sometimes using that water droplet like a lens ball to focus on a flower or something behind it, then you want as big a drop as you can get. And at that point, adding a bit of glycerin to your water and then very carefully enlarging the droplet is certainly a way of going about it. So yeah, thanks for reminding us of that one, April. Rosemary says, such a pretty colour too, Nurije. I really like this. Excellent. Okay, let's move on then. So next one is Robert. And what I love about this as well is the fact that this photo from Robert is one that we've seen through different iterations and versions across the course of the year. Excuse me. Because last winter, Texas got unprecedented levels of snow and ice and what have you. And I remember Robert going out with the camera and putting this picture in, and or variations on this picture. I think we critiqued it once or twice as well. So Robert says with regard to this, let's just see what he said here. It says, this tree shot in the Texas winter storm of 2021 is my favourite of the year. It's highly edited and flipped. So the original was the other way around, and there were more kind of other things in the background and the sides to it. What I've decided I think makes it look so interesting to me is that it looks like an MRI scan of the brain's blood vessels. That's certainly one way of looking at it. Yeah, I suppose I can kind of see what you mean. Personally, I think I prefer it as a tree, but then again, if it's reminding you, yeah, no, I see where you're coming. It has got a kind of brain shape to it, hasn't it? Says, this only occurred to me over the past few weeks. This picture has also been fairly successful on PhotoCrowd and was given an honourable mention at the Texas State Fair. Excellent stuff. I attribute the success of this picture to Kim and his valuable feedback. Oh well, smug points for me. You took the photo, I've come up with suggestions, you've played with it and done the editing. The credit is all yours, Robert. Hopefully I will take better photos in 2022. I'm sure you will take loads of great photos in 2022, Robert, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you create. So it is a great photo, this, and I've loved what you were doing with it right from the off. There is that sense of this tree, but also the whiteout around it. It becomes very illustrative, even though it's photographic. It could be pencil drawn. And yeah, it is a particular favourite one of mine, this, and great to know that it did well in the Texas State Fair photography competitions as well. So that's really good to hear that. So yeah, smug points for you there, Robert. So thanks for sending that one in. Excuse me. April says, oh wow, Robert, love it. Viji says, a closer one on the petals might be interesting as well. Well, that's referring back. Rosemary says, beautiful, Robert, so stark and dramatic. Love the simplicity. April says, congrats. Viji says, lovely one, Robert. And Inga says, beautiful. Yeah, plenty of support for that one too. Okay, next up then, another black and white one, but we're going to Roy now for a very different kind of feel. If the other one was what we call high key, which is where it's mostly white with little bits of black in it, this is more what you call low key, where it's mostly dark with little bits of highlight in it. So Roy says, this is my entry for Best Photo Podcast. This is the locomotion bridge over the Huddersfield Broad Canal. The lift mechanism is in working order after nearly 160 years. And the bridge is still opened from time to time. I do love dramatic black and white images, and when I converted this from the colour original, it just popped out of the screen at me. I feel it almost has one of those infrared feels. I consider it to be my best photo of 2021, although other images have done better in the competitions. And I think there's a lot in this. Now, one of the things I notice you very often do is you with your conversion software, and you convert to black and white, your blue skies, you go very black, and that's kind of what kind of gives it that infrared feel. Infrared cameras tend to do that, I think. Where I think it plays slightly against you is we lose a little bit of the line in here, of the structure here kind of does get, it sort of shows up better against where the clouds are coming in, but there's a little bit lost there. But all the same, having said that, I think it's a really strong dramatic image. I think obviously using a wide angle lens, which is creating distortion at the edges. Now there's different ways you could kind of, because you've not got parallel verticals, they're always going to sort of point in because of the angle you're at. It's a case of where you decide to tilt this. And I think you could have anchored, you'd have made this post that's running here in the middle, could have been the one that was directly up, and then the ones on the side would come in. What you've done this time, though, is you kind of anchored it to the left. So that this is essentially, this line here, or just the right edge of this part here, is your primary vertical. And because that's the primary vertical, that kind of anchors it, and everything else sort of tilts around based on that. You could play around with it with different angles, but to be honest, part of what makes this work is the diagonals. And I do like the diagonal lines that come up here and move up to this top right corner, which, okay, currently is behind me as you're looking into this picture. But yeah, really strong image, strong lines, strong diagonals, strong contrasts. So yeah, it is one of these which will pop out and work quite well at small level when you're on these kind of online competitions as well, and people are scrolling through fairly quickly. It's a bold image. Like I say, the only thing is I tend to feel is that, I mean, actually maybe you don't need to lighten the sky. You could still keep the sky that black, but I would sort of maybe go back into the bars across, these steel girders here themselves, and when you're doing the conversion process, maybe mask that slightly and allow that to be slightly lighter. You see, this bar to the left here really stands out, or even on this one where you've got highlighted edges helps to give that. And I think if you had a little bit of that just on there, at that point, what we're just talking here though is about tweaking the editing just to highlight it a little bit more. But other than that, I think it's a really strong image. So thanks for sending that one in, Roy. Okay, yeah. Oh, Sandy says, yes, with regard to Robert's picture, it does look like hand-drawn pencil drawing. Hand-drawn pencil drawing. And she loves the detail. April says, cool, this has an abstract feel. Now we're now to Roy's picture. Sandy says dramatic. Inga says cool and dramatic. Rosemary says congratulations to everyone on a celebration of the past year. Must scoot in a few minutes. To allow drive time in the snow. Okay, understand that, Rosemary, and I know you'll be tuning back in to watch the end of this afterwards. So, but thanks for being in so far and joining us. Right, okay, let's move on then to Sandra. And Sandra, yes, I remember this one. Sandra had a fox in the garden. Let's click through here, and I love this. Sandra says, my favourite photo of 2021 was this one taken at my allotment, which shows the fox that has been a regular visitor most evenings since mid-August. Although a simple photo, it was also the most successful of the year, which made me particularly happy since my allotment means so much to me. So here we go. First glance, we can see we've got the apples, we've got the different plants kicking around, little pathway going here, and then we have this fox. I love fantastic photo of the fox, just sort of sitting under the little apple tree there, and yeah, it's beautiful. Oddly enough, I can imagine this one as a jigsaw. We're currently doing it entirely in the family. Christmas, more kind of recent tradition is we've now started doing jigsaws just after Christmas or around Christmas during the Christmas holidays. Our current jigsaw is nothing like this, but there's something about this I can just imagine making a really good jigsaw puzzle. I think it's all the different textures, all the different bits where you'd have the pieces. Is this another apple? Is this a bit of the fox's nose? Is this a flower? Is this a bit of the water butt in the background? Lots of texture, it's really lovely. I can see why you're so happy with this one. I think I would be absolutely delighted if I managed to take all my photos of wildlife tend to be at the back of animals as they're disappearing into the woods. To be able to get a full face-on image of the fox, I think is beautiful. Looks so kind of strong, healthy, alert, and just there. How brilliant is that? So yeah, not surprised you're happy with that one, Sandra. So yeah, thanks for sending that one in. April says that fox is so cute and a lovely garden. Okay, Stacy then. So Stacy has been capturing graffiti. Where are we? Here we go. And says, Stacy says, one of my favourites this year was this graffiti train. It's an old train that sits behind thick brush on the canal. Lots of people love taking photos in this train. I was out and about with my photography club at Lambertville. It was a warm, fun day. Absolutely. I mean, the idea of, again, that notion of decay, of the old, of the falling apart, of the, well past its prime. I mean, interestingly, we can see down here where the seats would have been on some of them. Most of them are gone, but the bars where they have been, it's not a piece of glass left in any window. The whole thing just absolutely daubed with graffiti. My only kind of feeling is you've got a slight tilt here at the end, and I think because we're looking straight down the lens at the thing, you just want to kind of nudge it to the right a little, clockwise. Just nudge it clockwise, just about 1 or 2 degrees, just so that your verticals on this doorway are straight up, and then I think it would be ideal. But yeah, good shot. There's other versions of this where it would be quite interesting to see what a landscape crop of this would be, but at the same time I think probably for something like this, vertical is the way to go. It's really kind of capturing that sort of depth, which is what you're after with this. Also, what would be really interesting with this would be different times of day. What would this be like if the sunlight was coming through the windows on one side? So you've got some interesting shadow effects as well as the bright colours of the graffiti. I think that could be fun too. So if you get a chance to go back there, Stacy, think about it in, like I say, if try to get back there in different weather conditions. And I think if you get some sunlight coming through on one side or the other, casting shadows, if possible. I mean, it may well be too grown around it to make it possible, but if it is possible, I think you can get something really quite cool with that. But yeah, great photo, Stacy. So thanks very much for sending that one in. Meg loves the fox in the garden. And Viji loves the fox peeping through as well. And Robert says, fantastic fox shot. Very rare to see them up that close. Where else? Okay, so Robert says, love the graffiti and the abandoned train car. Very interesting. And Sandy says, this one looks like a painting. Lovely. Viji also says, loving this one, Stacy. Cool. Okay, so let's move on. We're going to now Vandana. Vandana has been at the flower photos too. So let's flick across here. It's rather a beautiful one. And again, what we have is we have the little water droplets on the flower, which they just really lifted out. It looks like you've darkened down the background as well. So unlike where, is it Roy or John? No, it's John who put the background behind the thing to isolate the flower. I think what you've done in the editing is darken down the background. Vandana says, my entry for the best photo that I took in 2021. I enjoyed this picture as it has the delicate petals of the flower and the raindrops all very clear. I took this while it was raining, so got soaking wet. So very similar to Nurije then. So out there in the rain, combining beautiful, colourful pink flower with raindrops. And it is really colourful. My feeling with this, when having darkened down the edges, Vandana, actually is you don't need quite so much of the top and the... Now, there is another thing here. There's a little red blob up here. I think if, it kind of grabs the attention. Remember we talked about with red is almost like selective colour. Anything red in the picture sort of grabs the eye. And because that's not the key part of the photo, it ends up kind of competing for our attention a little bit. I don't think you need to necessarily get rid of it. But actually, if you desaturated that a little bit and even turned it pink, I think you could probably leave that there. You don't need quite as much on the top. You could probably crop that so that that sort of sat there, and maybe you don't need quite so much on the bottom. So I would sort of maybe crop it something like that, take out a little bit of the bottom, a little bit of the top. And also what happens here is the curve of this stem, this stalk, comes down into the corner. And there's something, when you've got these leading lines, very often you find compositionally, if you can just place that line directly into the corner of the photo, it always just adds that little bit extra to it than when it's just off the corner. Play around with the crop, you'll see what I mean. Beyond that though, I think it's really lovely, bright, colourful, textured, and again the water droplets on it make it look really bring out that sort of playing with the light. So beautiful photo there, Vandana, and yeah, definitely smug points. So yeah, thanks for sending that one in. So excuse me. April says, looks like an hibiscus. Pretty water drops. Viji says, Vandana, too good a shot, especially the texture. And Sandy says, shadows may take away from the symmetry and the colours. Shadows. We're talking about the train shot. Possible, yes, it might do. And I think it would also, yes, it would be a different, it would be, if you were playing around with shadows, it would create a completely different style of shot. This is true. It's not necessarily that it would enhance that particular photo. It would give you a different style of photo. I just think with something like where you've got the length of the train and it's broken up by the windows, if you had light coming through, you would end up with line shadows, which would also give you that real sense of depth. Wherever the light was hitting or bouncing around, it would still highlight and show up the colour of the graffiti. So I just think it would be an interesting kind of thing to play around with, really. Inga says, with regard to Vandana's picture, wonderful textures. Cool. Okay, so we're going to move on to the last picture, and then I will tell you all what we're up to next week. So, final picture of the evening is Viji. And Viji says, this is my favourite taken from 2021. This was taken for the book challenge, which some of you may remember we did about 2 months ago. I managed to combine my love for books, travel and photography. This photo is about a kid securing admission to study abroad and travelling to Europe. The paper boat has the text, admissions open, few seats remain. And if you look here, now we know what that says. We can make out where it says admissions open, a few seats remain. My dream once was to travel abroad to study English literature. Though I didn't travel, I did study literature in India. This will remain one of my favourite photos ever. Happy New Year, everyone. And I must admit, I adore this photo, Viji. I think it's a fantastic... There's so much creativity. There's a joyfulness in it. The little figure in the boat, arm raised, a kind of woohoo. that sense of the tide, of riding the waves, of surfing in the boat, but the maps and that sense of travel and the words and the literature. I think all these things combine to create a really quite outstanding photo. I remember in the book challenge, this was my favourite photo of the book challenge, and I think pretty much I have to say this is probably my favourite photo of all the ones that have been sent in. Not to say that I'm doing down anybody else's. I think everybody's put in some amazing photos, and certainly everybody enjoys smug points. I think this one gets double smug points. So there you go, Viji. Really do love this photo. Thank you very much for sending that one in. Excuse me. Where are we? So Sandy says, gorgeous. Inga says, this is just amazing. And April says, yes, it's an amazing photo. Very creative. Excellent. So just a wee reminder, if you're wondering what I feel are my own personal favourite photos, then visit my blog, kimayres.blogspot.com, where you can find my favourite photos of 2021. And if you found these podcasts interesting, useful, educational, and you'd like to support them in any way, buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one way to do it. Another is invite your friends along, bring other people in, and make sure you join in. Cliffy says, Viji, great idea, fantastic. So, just to remind you then that as we come into 2022, we've got the year ahead of us. What would you like to learn with your photography? How do you want to advance your photography? And for each of you, that's probably going to be slightly different, though there might be common themes. Are you wanting to know more about the technical aspects of your camera? Are you wanting to know more about particular compositional techniques? Are you wanting to learn more about light? Are you looking to hone particular ideas of diagonals and leading lines, composition? Is there a particular kind of photography, like, water droplet photography or decay, abandoned building photography that you want to sort of try and develop? Is there any way we can help? So, whilst today was you get to show off your best photos, next week, critique section will be back open again. So this is your chance, if you belong to the Facebook group, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, post your images into Facebook and tell me a little bit about the photo, where you're having problems with it, what your sticking points are, and I will do my best to help. One of the big things we have with photography is we take our photos. Getting genuine feedback on it is always difficult because we stick our photos up on Facebook or social media and people either click like or they don't. Or some of our friends will go, that's beautiful, whether it is or it isn't, but they're just being supportive, which is lovely. Always good to have supportive friends, but it doesn't necessarily help you advance your photography. So how do you get an honest feedback from somebody who knows what they're talking about? And that's what this corner of the internet is about. So the critique section in many of the podcasts that I do is precisely the place for you to put your images in and ask for feedback. So if you're on the Facebook group, or you're on Facebook, join the group, stick the images in there, tell me about it. If you don't do Facebook, then kim@kimayres.co.uk, email me the image, and again, tell me where your sticking point is with the photo, what you're having difficulty with, what kind of suggestions you're looking for, and I will do my best to help you move forward with your photography. Also next week, I'm going to be talking about a photo shoot I did just before Christmas of the Wave Blues Band. Now, these photos haven't even been put out there in the public yet, so there'll be a little bit more going on. I think I'm going to be writing a blog post about it, but here's a quick little glance for you, a little peek. This was one of the photos I took. So, local band which needed a promotional photo, and we took over a pub for the day, used the smoke machine, played around with lighting. So, that's all for next week. So next week, the Wave Blues Band and critique. So make sure you get your pictures in. That's us. Happy New Year. Wonderful. Let's hope that 2022 is a kinder, more compassionate year for all of us. I think it was a strange thing as we came out of 2020. 2021, I think, certainly didn't turn out the way we expected it to. I certainly had a thought, well, vaccines will be coming, come the middle of the year, we'll be kind of returning to some kind of normality and being out with people and all the rest of it. What we didn't factor in was variations like the Delta variation and the Omicron variation. And sometimes it's felt like we've just not been able to get out into the world as much as we would like. But we can still do our photography. There's still loads of things you can do, even if you're in lockdown, even if you're socially isolating because of whatever, government guidelines, or because you've contracted COVID or been sitting near somebody who had COVID and you've been told to stay at home for 2 weeks. Lots of things we can do. So keep coming back, keep tuning in, bring your friends along. Let's grow these podcasts and help each other. Hope you all have an absolutely wonderful new year and year ahead. And with a bit of luck, I will see as many of you and maybe more next Sunday. Have a great week and enjoy the rest of your time. Take care. Bye-bye.